Rain fell hard over a Santa Fe, slicing the desert air into silver threads. The city glowed beneath the storm. Soft lights in adobe windows, the hum of traffic along Cerrillos Road, the quiet rhythm of a place too tired to sleep. Under a flickering streetlight outside a small diner, Elena Morales fumbled with her purse. Her hands trembled as she dug for her keys, the strap slipping from her shoulder. The downpour had already soaked her jeans and hair, turning her breath to mist. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this city, not tonight. She had sworn she'd never come back to New Mexico, the place where her brother had vanished 2 years ago, swallowed by people no one dared name. A gust of wind tore through the parking lot, scattering napkins, paper in her purse. Coins rolled across the wet pavement, receipts plastered to the ground. She knelt quickly, gathering what she could, rain soaking through her sleeves. A pair of polished boots stopped beside her. She froze. A man's voice, deep and quiet, broke through the rain. "Let me help you." When she looked up, the world seemed to tilt. He stood over her, umbrella half tilted against the wind, his black coat slick with rain. His face was angular, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes, dark amber under the streetlight, carried the kind of calm that comes only from danger. He crouched beside her, picking up a lipstick, a photograph, her wallet. His movements were unhurried, almost graceful. "You'll catch a cold," he said softly. Elena found her voice. "It's just rain. Rain can kill you if you stay in it long enough." He handed her the wallet, his hand brushing hers. His skin was warm despite the chill. She felt the contact all the way to her pulse. "Thank you," she murmured. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she hesitated, he smiled faintly. "You can trust me. For now." She took his hand. His grip was steady, confident. Not the grip of a stranger, but of someone used to being obeyed. Lightning flashed, and for an instant she saw the faint scar that ran along his jaw, disappearing beneath his collar. Something about it made her heart skip. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." He repeated it, as if tasting it. "Elena. And you?" He tilted his head slightly. "No one important." She gave a nervous laugh. "That sounds like something someone important would say." He smiled then, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're observant," thunder rumbled overhead. The wind caught her hair and blew it across her face. He reached forward, brushing it aside with the back of his hand. The gesture was casual, yet too intimate for a stranger. "You shouldn't walk alone this late," he said. "I wasn't planning to," she replied, glancing toward her car. "But plans have a way of falling apart." He studied her for a moment, the rain sliding down his face. "That's true, especially in this city." She bent to pick up the last of her things, a small photograph that had fallen face down in a puddle. He reached it first. The picture showed her brother, smiling beside her on a sunlit day. The ink had begun to blur at the edges. His expression changed. "Who's he?" "My brother," she said quietly. He nodded, slipping the photo carefully into her hand. "He looks kind." "He was," she whispered. "Was?" She hesitated. "He's missing." Something in his eyes flickered. Recognition or perhaps regret. "I'm sorry," she forced a thin smile. "Everyone says that." He looked at her for a long moment, the rain softening between them. Then he stepped back, motioning to the car parked behind hers. A sleek black SUV, windows tinted. "You're not safe here," he said. "Let me give you a ride." Elena froze. "No, thank you. I'm fine." He took a step closer. "You're shaking. And someone's watching you." Her stomach dropped. "What?" Without turning his head, he nodded toward the far side of the lot. A man sat in an old pickup, engine running, headlights off. Elena's breath caught. The stranger's voice stayed calm. "Get in the car. Who are you?" she demanded. "The man keeping you alive," he said simply. Lightning cracked again, closer this time. Elena hesitated for a single heartbeat, then grabbed her purse and followed him. The SUV was quiet inside, the hum of the rain muffled by tinted glass. The dashboard lights glowed faint blue, casting his face in half shadow. He drove through the narrow streets with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely against the gear shift. She watched his reflection in the window, the sharp line of his jaw, the stillness in his shoulders. He didn't speak until they had left the city behind. "Where were you headed?" "Nowhere," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Everyone's headed somewhere, even when they're running." She looked at him. "How do you know I'm running?" "Because I've seen that look before." "In who?" "In the mirror." The admission hung between them, unexpected and unguarded. "Tell me your name," she said again. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Gabriel Navarro." The name hit like a whisper she wasn't supposed to hear. She had read it before, on the news, in warnings, in the kind of stories whispered in Spanish and never written down. A man whose empire was built in shadows, a name spoken like a storm one prays will pass by. Yes. Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't be here." He gave a quiet laugh. "Neither should you." They drove in silence until the rain softened into drizzle. The desert outside glowed under the headlights, vast and empty. Finally, Gabriel said, "Your brother worked for someone who owed me money." "That's how I know his name." "And yours?" Elena's chest went cold. "Then why help me?" He turned the wheel slowly, guiding the car down a narrow dirt road that disappeared into the darkness. "Because the people who took him will come for you next." She stared at him, heart pounding. "And you'll protect me?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "I keep what I claim, Elena. I didn't ask to be claimed." "No," he said softly. "But here you are." Outside, the storm began again, lightning flickering across the horizon. Elena turned toward the window, unable to answer. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed, trembling, caught between fear and something she couldn't name, and beside her, Gabriel Navarro, the man everyone feared, drove through the rain as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. She didn't know if she was being rescued or taken. All she knew was that the night had changed everything, and somewhere between the thunder and the rhythm of her heartbeat, she realized one terrifying truth. Sometimes danger doesn't chase you. Sometimes it stops the car, picks up your purse, and takes your heart instead. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the desert scrub glistening beneath a pale sky. The world smelled of damp earth and creosote. From the window of the villa, Elena could see the mountains glowing pink in the sunrise. It was the kind of beauty that should have meant peace. But inside, her chest felt heavy, suspended somewhere between disbelief and fear. Gabriel Navarro's house sat on a ridge above Santa Fe, hidden behind tall iron gates and whispering pines. The architecture was all muted stone and glass, elegant in its restraint. The kind of place that suggested not wealth, but control. Elena hadn't spoken much since last night. The drive through the rain, the quiet roads, his certainty that she was in danger. It all played in her head like a dream that refused to end. She found him in the courtyard, standing by a long stone fountain, speaking quietly into a phone. The wind carried fragments of his words, half in English, half in Spanish, numbers, names, directions. When he noticed her, he ended the call immediately. "You slept?" he asked. "Not really. Dreams?" "Memories," she said. He nodded once. "Those are worse." Elena crossed her arms. "You brought me here without asking. That doesn't make you my savior." "No," he said. "It makes me responsible." "For what?" "For the fact that you're still breathing." She flinched at his tone, flat, unshaken. "You make that sound like a debt." Gabriel studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. "Everything is a debt, Elena. You just haven't learned how the world keeps score." "I didn't ask for this world. Neither did I." The villa felt too large for two people. Elena wandered through the quiet halls, tracing her fingers along the cool plaster walls. Every room seemed to hold its breath. The art was sparse. Landscapes, old photographs, nothing sentimental. In the kitchen, she found a woman in her 40s setting down a tray of coffee and fruit. The woman smiled politely. "Señor Navarro asked me to make sure you eat." "I'm not hungry," Elena said. The woman nodded, unoffended. "You should try the coffee anyway. It helps with the altitude." When she left, Elena poured herself a cup and stepped out onto the terrace. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and pine. She took a long sip, staring at the horizon, trying to convince herself that this was still her life. But the longer she stayed, the less it felt like her own. Later, she found Gabriel in what looked like an office. He was leaning over a table covered in papers, his expression focused but distant. The morning light cut across the side of his face, outlining the scar along his jaw. She leaned against the doorframe. "What is all this?" "Logistics," he said. "Deliveries, schedules. For what?" He looked up, eyes locking with hers. "You don't want to know." "I already do," she said quietly. "I've read the news." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then you know what they call me." Elena's stomach tightened. "They call you a killer." He didn't react. "And you? What do you call me?" "I don't know yet." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." Silence filled the space between them, thick as dust. Finally, she said, "If you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it already. So what do you really want?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Your brother." Her pulse jumped. "You know where he is?" "I know where he was. 2 years ago, he worked for a man who thought loyalty was optional. When that man disappeared, your brother vanished with him." Elena's voice trembled. "And you think he's alive?" Gabriel's eyes softened. "I think he was trying to protect you." She blinked hard, tears threatening. "You don't even know him." "I didn't have to," he said quietly. "I know the look of someone who's willing to burn for the people they love." Her breath caught. "And what did it cost you, Gabriel?" He didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the window, where sunlight bled through the rain-streaked glass. "More than I could ever repay." That night, the storm returned. Not violent this time, just steady, like a heartbeat against the roof. Elena sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the flames. The house was too quiet again. She could feel the weight of Gabriel's presence even when he wasn't in the room. When he finally appeared, he was barefoot, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The firelight caught the edge of his profile, warm against the darkness. "You should sleep," he said. "I can't." He nodded toward the flames. "They make it worse sometimes." She looked up at him. "You sound like you've done this before." "Every night." He sat across from her, silent for a moment. The sound of rain filled the spaces between words. "I used to think power would make me untouchable," he said quietly. "Then I learned it only makes you a target." She studied him carefully. "Then why keep it?" "Because if I let it go, someone worse will take it." "Maybe that's just what you tell yourself." He smiled, small and sad. "Maybe." The fire popped softly, a spark jumping between the logs. Elena felt her heartbeat match its rhythm. "Gabriel," she whispered, "what happens when you can't protect everyone?" He looked at her then, eyes dark and tired. "Then you protect the one you can." The room seemed smaller suddenly. The air between them charged with something fragile, dangerous, real. She didn't move, didn't speak. Neither did he. But the silence said enough, that in a world made of secrets and storms, they had found something they didn't mean to. A moment that felt like safety, even if it wasn't. Outside, the rain eased into mist. The fire burned low. Gabriel set his glass aside and stood, pausing by the doorway. "Go to sleep, Elena. Tomorrow will bring questions you're not ready for." "And you?" she asked. He gave a faint smile. "I stopped sleeping years ago." When he was gone, she watched the flames until they blurred. Her heart still beat too fast, as if trying to catch up to something her mind couldn't name. The storm whispered against the windows, and somewhere deep inside, Elena realized she wasn't running anymore. She was waiting, and that terrified her most of all. Morning came quietly, pale and colorless, washing the villa in silver light. The storm had left the sky clean, but inside, the air felt heavy, as if the rain had only moved indoors. Elena stood at the window, arms folded, watching the wind push through the pines that lined the ridge. She had been awake for hours, haunted by the same thought looping through her mind. Her brother had worked for Gabriel Navarro. Now she wanted to know what that truly meant. She found him in the study again, bent over the same stack of papers, reading with the kind of stillness that comes from habit, not peace. The morning sun outlined the scar along his jaw, and for a brief moment she could see the weariness underneath his control. "I know you're hiding something from me," she said. He didn't look up. "You'll have to be more specific." "My brother," she said, stepping closer. "You said he worked for a man who owed you money. That man was you, wasn't it?" He exhaled slowly, then set the papers aside. "He worked for me, yes, but not the way you think." "Then how?" Gabriel leaned back in his chair. "Your brother wasn't part of my business. He was part of my escape from it." Elena frowned. "What does that mean?" He looked at her then, eyes dark but steady. "He helped me move information, bank codes, shipment records, names, things that could tear down the men I used to serve. We were going to expose them. End it." Her pulse quickened. "So he was working against them?" "Yes, and they found out before we could finish." Elena's throat tightened. "That's why he disappeared." Gabriel nodded once, eyes drifting toward the window. "I told him to run. He wouldn't. He said if he left without telling you why, you'd never forgive him." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. He was right. Gabriel rose, moving closer, his voice softer now. "He saved more lives than he'll ever know, including mine." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Then why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because the truth doesn't set people free, Elena. It chains them to what they've lost." She shook her head, anger rising through the grief. "You don't get to decide what I can handle." "I decided to keep you alive," he said quietly. "For what?" she demanded. "To keep your conscience clean?" His voice sharpened. "No, because you're the last piece of him I haven't failed." The words hit her like a blow. She turned away, gripping the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. The air between them crackled with everything neither could say. Finally, she whispered, "You said you keep what you claim." He was silent. "Does that include me?" she asked, voice trembling. He moved toward her then, slowly, carefully, until she could feel the warmth of him behind her. His reflection appeared beside hers in the window, two blurred outlines framed by the bright morning. "No," he said softly. "You're not something to be kept. You're something I owe." She turned to face him. "You owe me nothing. I owe your brother," he said. "And this is how I pay him back." Elena met his eyes. "By locking me away in a house I didn't choose?" His jaw tightened. "By keeping you alive long enough to choose something better." Their eyes held, the silence stretching like a wire ready to snap. Then she stepped closer, so close she could feel the rhythm of his breath. "What if I don't want to be safe anymore?" she said quietly. He blinked, the control in his face fracturing for just a second. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." "Elena," he warned, but his voice had lost its edge. She studied him, her pulse racing. "You think you've built a life out of power, but you're just hiding behind it. You talk about debt and duty, but what about everything else you've forgotten how to feel?" He took a step back, as if the words had struck him harder than a weapon. "Feelings don't survive in my world." "Then maybe you should leave it," she whispered. He gave a low, humorless laugh. "You make it sound easy." "I think it would be," she said, "if you weren't so afraid of what comes after." The room went still. Then Gabriel reached out, his hand hovering just short of her cheek. His fingers trembled, not from hesitation, but from restraint. "Don't make me believe in something I can't keep," he said. "Maybe you already do." For a heartbeat, they stood suspended in that fragile space between confession and collapse. Then he stepped away, breaking whatever had been building between them. "Elena," he said softly, "there's something else you need to know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What now?" He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. "Your brother sent this to me before he disappeared. I didn't look at it. I thought it was safer that way, but now it's yours." She stared at the drive as if it might burn her fingers. "What's on it?" "His truth," Gabriel said. "And mine." She reached for it slowly, her hand brushing his. The touch was brief but electric, charged with everything they hadn't said. "Be careful," he murmured. "Once you know what's on that drive, nothing between us will be the same." Elena met his gaze, her heart hammering. Maybe that's the point. He didn't stop her as she turned and walked out of the room, the small flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. Outside, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, revealing a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Inside, behind the closed door, Gabriel Navarro leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling with a weight that had nothing to do with breath. He had just given her the key to destroy everything he'd ever built. And, maybe, the only chance he'd ever had to be forgiven. The flash drive was small enough to disappear inside her palm, yet it felt heavier than the house itself. Elena held it as she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind slip through the cracks in the old wooden shutters. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still carried that damp, metallic smell of something unfinished. She turned the drive over and over, her heartbeat sinking with the movement. Somewhere in that tiny piece of metal was her brother's final message, the truth he had died for. And now it was hers to open, hers to decide what came next. But what if the truth burned everything it touched? The door creaked softly. Gabriel stood in the frame, sleeves rolled, his expression unreadable in the half-light. "You found it," he said. Elena nodded. "You knew I would." He stepped closer, the faint scent of cedar and rain still clinging to him. "I should have destroyed it a long time ago." "Then why didn't you?" "Because part of me hoped someone else could do what I couldn't." "End it?" "Free me from it," he said quietly. She studied him, the man the world called ruthless. In the warm lamplight, he looked nothing like a myth. There were shadows under his eyes, lines around his mouth that hadn't been there before. "Gabriel," she whispered, "if what's on this drive destroys you, what am I supposed to do with it?" He gave a faint, tired smile. "Whatever your brother wanted you to." She stared at him. "You're not even going to tell me what's on it." "I don't have to. You'll understand when you see it." He turned to leave, but she stopped him. "If I open it, will I hate you?" He paused, his back to her. "Probably. Then why give it to me?" He looked over his shoulder, eyes darker now. "Because you deserve the truth, even if it ruins me." She waited until midnight. The house had gone still, the guards silent, the sky outside pale with distant lightning. Elena slipped into the study, her bare feet soundless against the stone floor. She sat at the desk, plugged the flash drive into the laptop, and held her breath. The screen flickered to life. A folder opened, a single video file dated almost 2 years ago. Her brother's face appeared. He looked older than she remembered, tired but resolute. "If you're watching this, Elena," he began, "then it means Gabriel kept his word. It means I didn't make it back." He took a shaky breath. "You've probably heard his name 100 different ways. The devil, the king, the ghost of Santa Fe. But listen to me, Hermana. He's not the man they say he is." Elena's eyes filled. "I worked for him because I saw something I'd stopped believing in. Someone trying to make things right, even if it was too late. He built his empire to control the people who used to control us, but when you fight monsters, you start to look like one." Gabriel's voice came faintly from behind her. "Turn it off," she spun. He stood in the doorway, face pale, eyes unreadable. "Gabriel, please." His tone was calm, but there was something raw in it. "You've seen enough." She hesitated, then clicked pause. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the computer fan. "I needed to know," she said. "I needed to hear him." "I warned you," he murmured. "Truth isn't kind." She rose, the tears on her face catching the light. "You tried to save him, didn't you?" Gabriel's gaze dropped to the floor. "I failed." He didn't think so. He looked up sharply, the ache in his eyes breaking through his composure. "Then your brother was a better man than me?" She stepped closer. "No. He was just someone who believed in you." The silence that followed was long, weighted. The storm outside rolled over the valley again, low thunder vibrating through the walls. Finally, she whispered, "What happens if I give this to the police?" He exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a laugh. Then I disappear. Maybe worse, and if I don't, then you live with what you know. Her chest ached. And what do you want me to do? His voice dropped. What you can live with. The next morning came cold and bright. The storm had finally broken for good. Elena stood outside by the fountain where the first sunlight touched the water. Gabriel approached, his coat over one arm, the air between them taut with everything unspoken. You're leaving, she said. I have to. The people I turned against won't stop until they find me. Or you. I could give them the drive, she said softly. You could, he said. But you won't. How can you be so sure? Because you're like your brother. He smiled faintly. You'd rather save a life than ruin one. She looked down at her hands. And what about you? Who saves you? He took a step closer, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of smoke and rain that clung to him. You already did. She felt tears prick at her eyes. Don't say that. It's true, he said. For the first time in years, I remember what it feels like to be someone worth saving. Elena shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. Then stay. He touched her face, his thumb tracing a line across her cheek, wiping away a tear. If I stay, they'll come for you, and I couldn't bear that. Gabriel, he leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. The world around them fell away. The hum of the wind, the whisper of the fountain, the weight of everything they'd lost. If I ever see you again, he said, his breath trembling against her skin, it means I survived. Then survive, she whispered. He smiled softly, his eyes closing for a moment. Then he stepped back, and the space between them filled with silence. He turned, walking toward the waiting car. The engine started. Gravel crunched under the tires. Elena watched until he vanished down the long road that led into the desert. That evening, she returned to the study. The laptop still sat open, the drive still glowing faintly in the port. She stared at it for a long time before reaching out and ejecting it. She walked outside and crossed the courtyard. The sun had set, and the sky was streaked with gold fading to violet. She tossed the flash drive into the fountain. It sank slowly, disappearing beneath the rippling water. The world went quiet. Elena closed her eyes, letting the cool air wash over her. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, faint, far away. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hunted. She didn't feel owned. She only felt free. And though she would never see Gabriel Navarro again, she carried him with her, in the stillness, in the storms, in the quiet heartbeat that whispered a truth she would never say aloud, that sometimes love isn't what saves you. It's what makes you strong enough to save yourself. Weeks passed before the rain came again. By then, Elena had left the villa and the city behind. She drove south until the mountains melted into desert, and the sky stretched wide enough to make her feel small again. The roads were quiet, scattered with abandoned gas stations, and the occasional cluster of mailboxes that marked someone's attempt at permanence. She stopped in a town called Truth or Consequences, a name that felt like a riddle and a warning. The motel was old but clean, the kind of place that charged by the week. She paid in cash, unpacked her few belongings, and watched the sunset stain the world in shades of copper and violet. At night, she dreamed of water, of the fountain swallowing the flash drive, of Gabriel's hand slipping from hers, of her brother's voice saying her name like it was a promise. By morning, the dreams faded but the ache stayed. In town, she found work at a small art gallery near the river. It was quiet, mostly empty except for tourists who wandered in looking for postcards and shelter from the heat. The owner, an elderly woman named Ruth, taught her how to clean brushes and frame canvases. You have a steady hand, Ruth said one afternoon. You could learn to paint if you wanted. Elena smiled faintly. Maybe someday. Someday has a way of becoming never, Ruth replied. Don't wait too long to want something. That night, Elena sat by the river with a small sketchbook she'd bought from the shop. She didn't draw landscapes or still lifes. She drew faces, a man with storm-colored eyes, a scar along his jaw, a smile that existed somewhere between danger and tenderness. The water glimmered under the moonlight. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You told me to live." The wind moved gently through the reeds, like an answer. Months slid by. Seasons shifted. She grew used to the rhythm of quiet. Morning coffee, work at the gallery, long walks by the river. The nightmares came less often. When they did, they no longer ended in fear but in memory. A single image of Gabriel standing in the rain, his coat dark, his voice low. "Get in. I'll protect you." Sometimes she wondered if he was still alive. The news never said. His empire had dissolved quietly, absorbed by smaller names and faceless men. But there were rumors. Whispers of a man seen in Madrid, in Buenos Aires, in places where the law blurred with mercy. She didn't chase them. Some ghosts were meant to wander. One afternoon, while closing the gallery, she noticed a package on the counter. No return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar but careful. Inside was a small wooden box. When she opened it, she found a silver pendant shaped like a compass. Simple, elegant, its face etched with faint initials. GN beneath it, a note in the same steady hand. The desert taught me one thing. Storms don't erase the earth. They carve it into something stronger. "You were my storm, Elena," her breath caught. The letter smelled faintly of cedar and rain. She pressed the pendant into her palm, its metal warm from the sun. Her heart ached, but not the way it used to. This ache carried something else. Gratitude, maybe, or peace disguised as longing. She walked outside into the fading light, the compass glinting in her hand. The air was still, heavy with the scent of rain waiting to fall. When the first drops touched her face, she didn't move. Later that evening, she stood on the roof of her small apartment, barefoot, watching lightning bloom along the horizon. The storm was gentle, the kind that didn't destroy, only reminded. She held the compass up to the sky. It spun once, caught north, then stilled. For the first time since that night in Santa Fe, she didn't feel lost. She whispered, "Thank you," into the wind, not to the storm, not to the sky, but to the man whose choices had taught her that love wasn't meant to be owned or caged. It was meant to change you, to break you open, to teach you what it meant to start again. When the rain finally came, it was soft and steady, washing the dust from the world. Elena closed her eyes, lifted her face to the sky, and let it fall. She didn't need to run anymore. She was already home, and somewhere far away, on a different road under the same rain. A man paused beneath an overpass, looked toward the horizon and smiled. He touched the scar on his jaw, as if remembering a promise, and whispered into the thunder, "Found you." The rain carried the words away across the desert, back to her. The end.